Kiran Yalavarthi is my successor at Wells Fargo. He cannot join. He's under all the stress that I used to have. Get pounded by regulator and examination and things like that, right? So I wish him the best, not getting any MRA, right, Rafiq? Okay. So, but anyway.
Early warnings.
So thank you so much. I have I'm very happy here to have all the panelists. This is really people that in the trenches every day, building model, deploying model, championing. So this is really a special pleasure for me to have everybody here in the panel. So we're going to learn from that. So maybe I start with the first question. A lot of people, the excitement. I'll start probably with the AI is not anything new. We've done it for many years. So probably we start with that. The application of AI, both predictive AI and generative AI in your space. So my question for you and probably Chris, start with that and also shared some example or some area that you really see the beyond the POC, but you really see the ROI.
Hi everyone. So, see, I think let me answer the question on both AI as well as generative AI. I think both are equally important. I was telling Chris Bowman, I think yesterday during dinner, that 80% of the chatter is about generative AI, but 80% of the work that actually happens is predictive AI. Okay, so predictive AI is not, yesterday's news by any means. So lots and lots of applications of predictive AI in financial services. We use it for a lot of marketing, a lot of credit risk, fraud detection, a lot of operational improvement steps. I think the keynote that Dan German was talking about, I think there are literally in any application within the bank, any situation within the bank where you need to take decisions based on large volumes of data. Forecasting is another example. There's an application for using AI and machine learning techniques, and those are commonly the places where we use it. There's always room for us to get better, even in all of those areas, because our data sets are constantly growing. We are getting better at using structured and unstructured data together in a lot of our models. The algorithms are getting better, the computer is getting better. All of that is constantly changing, and that work never ends. Okay. On the generative AI side, yes, I think that is a lot of the work where where things are new. Some of the places where we are very close with production pilots, if not actually in production, is examples like how do you help developers write better quality code? How do you get them to document that code better? How do you do code translations? Okay, for a lot of the people who work in the technology functions, moving from one technology to another is a common thing. It keeps happening every 3 or 4 years. For data processing, you had Spark. Now you have something else. For modeling, you used R. Now you're using Python, right? That change is a constant. And that is where I think we found that the LLMs and the generative AI tools have had a really big impact in terms of making that conversion process as painless as possible. Another place is around helping our contact center agents answer questions a lot more effectively from customers. Today, there are close to 3,000 documents that they have to search and find the answer and relay it back to the customer. It's a classic kind of retrieval augmented generation type use case. And those are the places where we are definitely seeing leverage, and we are in production pilots in both of those areas.
Yeah, I fully agree with Chris' comment on the AI still being useful, but GenAI is taking all the limelight. to the point that a lot of data scientists, their full-time job is developing GenAI solutions. The AI is taking a back burner. So within BlackRock, and for people who are not within financial services, BlackRock is asset manager primarily with Aladdin as a software arm. I think last time we had a quarterly check, there were $11 trillion under management. So BlackRock grouped the GenAI applications into three large buckets: alpha generation, client experience, and internal productivity enhancement. So Chris' example would fall into productivity enhancement because the user of GenAI tools are mostly internal employees. You have a human in the loop to check the results. And the measure of ROI would be how productive you made the employees compared to they do the process without GenAI help. In the first two buckets, so alpha generation usually doesn't mean you ask GPT which stock I should buy or how I construct my portfolio. It's in the PMO analyst existing workflow, which part has a lot of text processing, unstructured information processing that in the past traditional ML couldn't tackle effectively. The ROI using traditional NLP technique was so low that it's just not worth attempting. So the GenAI wave did unlock a lot of the opportunities. There were a huge amount of experimentation happening within the firm from third-party vendors. Examples include using GenAI to auto-process earnings call transcripts, sell-side notes, any, third-party report, internal analyst report, synthesize, summarize, get themes, allow people to ask questions against any underlying material that can significantly increase people's coverage in terms of tickers, sectors, or even events around the world. Or it could even be some, let's say it's not actively managed fund, it's passive fund. You have an ETF. You have to keep track of what tickers should be in your tracking universe that might be associated with regulatory filings, government announcement, or any kind of other events. In the past, you have to have people read these and follow those events. Now you can have GenAI systematically scrape what you think should be looked for, and then have a human validate. So that enhances the productivity. In terms of client experience, BlackRock actually initially launched the chatbot within Aladdin and I think Ifran Insight, which is another software offering on the software side, which it basically is a ChatGPT, but answer questions using our materials. Because Aladdin is a closed system, it's a software built for risk management and trading functions. You can't usually ask GPT how to do this and that in Aladdin. It's like you ask GPT how to do things in Bloomberg, you probably can't get very accurate answers because it's a closed source system. So this significantly speed up people's ability to get answers. And we are planning on adding that chat functionality on BlackRock.com as well.
With all this excitement, I'm going to ask my fellow, formerly I used to do model risk management, so I'm going to ask the one of the head of model risk management that I know very well as friend. How do you deal with this governance? You have to keep your company safe, right?
Yes.
Rafik, how do you deal with this? Keep the innovation, the excitement, get the benefit, but keep company safe. So share with me a little with the audience on this.
Well, Agu said he retired. I don't see him retiring. Okay. So anyway, good question. It's super important when you're looking at your framework, and you want a very robust framework that will address all these changes, rapid changes in innovation, technology, like GenAI and AI. So you don't want to be on a cruise ship. You want to be on a speedboat. And I don't want to say Titanic. Speedboat. So you want to be on the speedboat. And then when you look at generative AI, it has its own unique risk, confabulation. making things up, harmful recommendation, mishandling of sensitive data. So with that unique risk, you definitely need to go back to your governance, your procedures and standards that were based on SR 11.7, and you need to enhance it. And by enhancing it, you are tackling the non-deterministic and the adaptability of these types of models. So the first thing comes to mind is creating AI governance working group, which include people like me, model risk, compliance, IT risk, third-party management risk, data management risk. So this group includes a diverse perspective of what's happening in the organization. And what they do, they address things like the ownership, who owns these models. Not everything falls under model risk management. The initial controls, usually, and Agus is one of the leaders on this. Usually when you build a model, you validate, and then you look at the controls. Now it's a different story. You need the initial controls at the beginning to address what's in scope, what's out of scope, and to make sure there is controls, whoever is managing the risk of that model. And then you have runaway models. What do I mean by runaway models is you have a vendor that's using embedded AI in it. So having this group can identify way ahead of time the issues, who have access to the system, managing the ethical use, and over time the ethical use of that, and ensuring there's a human in the loop. And then when you come to the model life cycle, the GenAI model life cycle, the identification, the first thing you want to make sure somebody comes to you within that working group is you want to identify if it's a model, a tool, or it's an expert judgment, the stuff that we do. Identification is super important, and then the next step is the controls. And then you start, and this I give credit to Agus, is what's in scope, what's out of scope. It's super important to get this consistency, what makes it into the model risk. And according, from learning from him from the beginning 2 years ago, there's an inherent risk that's associated with GenAI, the users and usages. I don't want to go in detail, but with controls on top of it, you can determine what's in scope, what's out of scope. The second thing is the tiering. Yes, traditionally we look at significance, reliance, and uncertainty. You want to keep that in mind and bring the flavor of GenAI into it. And it's super important to do this correctly, because if you look at your aggregate model risk, you have your inherent risk, which is one component of it, is your risk distribution, your tier distribution. If it's all tier 1 and you do mistake in identifying your tiering, you have high inherent risk. And then your KRIs, most of your KRIs are tier 1 or tier 2, so your denominator gets inflated if you don't do your tiering correctly. So that's one area that you need to focus on, the validation, the development. If you look at the model life cycle, you have identification, tiering, development, validation. On the validation, I have seen beautiful stuff prior to me joining, and I know today the team is going to walk you some of the stuff that is needed to enhance your validation template. So how robust is your model? Performance testing, we're good in that. But again, these types of models requires a metric which is called quality and safety metric. And I saw some of the testing that you're doing on the quality, coherence, relevancy, groundedness, safety. Is the content is appropriate? Is the content is biased? Is the content have any harmful situation in it? The prompt creativity, all of that. It's a combination, and this is an area in the quant side, you need the domain expertise. It's a new area. It's like learning a new language, especially on the qualitative side. When you look at EJM, we rely heavily on the model owner to understand the expert judgment in it. And here, and it is very, very time-consuming, busy work, that you need tools that can automate the testing. And all you need to do is sniff through it and write a good report and make sure that the model is fit to use. And again, I mean, there's other stuff, the ongoing monitoring and change management. It's super important to understand what constitutes a significant changes that requires model risk management, interference, and do the effective change and call it change-based validation, and what is considered insignificant, let it go and move on. So that's in short.
Thank you so much. So Rafik covered the entire whole semester conversation of model risk management in a few minutes. So thank you, Rafik. I want to ask a little bit back to the on the model development side, and then I'll ask on the model validation again. When we're dealing with Gen AI now, in particular, how do you do it? How you approach it in your company? Do you develop yourself? Do you fine tune your model? Do you do zero shot? Do you use open source? Do you use vendor? How's your team get structured to build and deploy this, Chris?
So, see, I think given the size of the organization we are still, a mid-sized bank, and also given that a lot of this technology is new, we are still largely going with models which have already been pre-built. Okay, so in fact, my advice for anybody who is starting a new use case would be, for day one, start with something that's pre-built. You'll at least get some baseline understanding of the performance that you would expect. When you get to day 90 and day 180, you will know more about the problem, more about all of the challenges, and then you'll know how to pick a better model to be able to answer your use case better. Okay, so that's a general approach we've been following. We are going with pre-built models. We are going with some of the more proprietary models to begin with, but we absolutely want to start looking at open source models in that space. And so I think that also defines how we work with our different vendors. Okay, so the vendor partners, we obviously work very closely with H2O on a bunch of things. We've done a ton of work on the predictive AI side. We're just starting some conversations on generative AI in terms of how to get that going. We work with a lot of our compute and data is on AWS. Okay, so we are using SageMaker, we are using Amazon Bedrock for a lot of the work that we are doing. And so that's been our general approach. Okay, so I think our opening answer is always going to be working with the large pre-built models. But then as we get to day 90, day 180, once we know the problem a lot better, we start to converge into smaller models.
Yeah, I agree. I think that covers the internal development, I guess, majority of them. But it doesn't always start with the internal development. And in a somewhat larger organization, there are many teams, especially, for example, in BlackRock, there are 4,000 to 5,000 engineers because of Aladdin. So the intuition when a new thing come out is everyone go to do their own experimentation. Everyone suddenly become a data scientist and start creating GenAI solutions. So I think the company deliberated quite a while to see what is the correct approach towards GenAI experimentation. The company don't want to kill innovation, but they don't want to throw a lot of resources wastefully chasing similar use cases. So I think over time, there has been developed a logic that if the use cases are very generic, they are most likely tackled by tech companies. For example, productivity enhancement, Microsoft 360 Copilot tackle most of it. We're already using Outlook, Word, Excel, OneDrive. All the files are pretty much over there. So if you want to just do generic Q&A on your files or do summarization or email drafting, a number of those are automatically tackled by the Microsoft 365, so there's no point you go develop the same thing, and we can't compete with tech companies on the generic model development anyway. And even and the code writing, I think Krish mentioned. So again, Copilot from GitHub is doing a good job. I'm sure there are other offerings, but the point is we're not going to develop the code writing generic functionality because that's not our competitive strength. And even other things that is going to work on internal materials, some specialized vendors just have a much better ROI because you have to develop an end-to-end software system. It's not just a GenAI piece. Sometimes we develop in-house solutions that perform on par or better than the vendor solution, but you have to develop every other part of the software system to support this GenAI solution, right? You need to have a UI that is robust, you need a team to maintain it, you need to maintain database, you need to add a trillion buttons to make it work well. We don't have that kind of resource to develop every platform just to support a new GenAI use case. So in many cases, we just decide that the vendor solution is better. The developer set, especially if we're already using the vendor for some other like platform-related things, they plug their GenAI tool. It doesn't cost much to switch it on. It passes the InfoSec model risk. Then we just buy it. Because they are also just calling GPT API, right? It doesn't cost them all that much, but it's going to cost us a lot if we have to build a platform for it. So in those cases, we don't get to develop in-house. But in some critical competitive area like Aladdin or alpha generation, you cannot outsource that because that's your core competency. Then you look at the different options. What's your performance threshold? What's your budget? What is ROI? Does it make sense to do one shot, few shots, prompt engineering, model fine-tuning, or even training a model from scratch? And usually that's not large language models training from scratch because that costs too much. And we don't need most of those functionality, right? You don't need to scrape the entire internet to train a foundational model to do your specific thing. Most likely, model fine-tuning can do that. Or if your thing is very specific, you can have your training sample and train a smaller model that in your area of performance can perform on par with the big model.
Yeah, just wanted to second, one thing that you said, which is, I think, given the size of the engineering teams, definitely in BlackRock, but also here with us at Citizens, you will always find that the same problem is being tackled by multiple people at multiple places. And so one of the things, Agus, that we've done really from day one is that we've had a very strong program management office just to make sure that you're not having 5 different rack solutions, all using somewhat similar technologies, but doing it in slightly different ways because they just felt like doing it. So I think having that consistency so that we don't just waste calories trying and reconciling 5 different approaches, which is a nightmare from an engineering standpoint, nightmare for InfoSec, nightmare for model validation. I think that's where we're trying to be a lot more streamlined.
I have one question that it's very tempting for me to ask. So I'm going to ask this question.
On a validation.
No. But maybe attach a little bit of that. The model development, all this thing, it used to be the domain of data scientists. Yeah, many of you, all of you, grew up from data science environment. Now in the Gen AI environment, where is the data science when you do development? Do we really need data scientists? Is it all just tech stuff? We don't need data scientists. So what's your thought on this? So I'm going to ask this all of you on this.
See, my view of what a data scientist is, maybe it is 50% of being able to handle the technology, but 50% is understanding the business problem and understanding the data really, really deeply. Okay. I think whether you're doing generative AI or predictive AI, or whether you're doing AI today or 10 years from now or 10 years in the past, I think all of those things are going to be important. So yes, I think the role of the data scientist is evolving a little bit, okay, that they don't open notebooks and write, detailed level codes in every situation. And this is true for predictive AI as well. With driverless AI, you don't need a data scientist to go and open up a notebook and start to write code. But I think the thinking in terms of how do you structure the problem, what types of data to use, how to spot quality issues in the data. I think all of those are very critical business skills, okay, which I think data scientists have. So, I don't really care whether an engineer does it or a data scientist does it, so long as they pay attention to all of these things, which is what is the business problem, what is the intended solutions, who's the customer, who's the user, what is the quality of the data. So long as they handle all of these things in addition to the technology, I'm good, okay? But it is not simply technology, that I'm very clear.
Yeah.
I'll go last.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of respect to the risk team. I think it's a necessary function that all the financial institutions have, but it can be a gatekeeper and stop developers from launching their models in production, or you can be industry leading and do your own independent research and be experts in this area. In fact, it's very difficult to do good model validation because there are probably, let's say, 10 times developers per model validator. So the model validator need to be knowing a little bit of everything, right? That's intrinsically a very challenging thing. So doing this well, I definitely have seen August did his role pretty well. I mean, you really earn admiration from the developers, or despise if you don't do it very well. So in terms of data science and engineering, we currently are in close collaboration with engineering to develop our solution. So I observe, curious enough, that if they code in Python, then we pretty much have the same tools. And nowadays, GenAI solution development is all calling API, prompt engineering. So that itself is not a differentiating factor. In fact, data scientists probably write lower quality code compared to data engineers. But I think a lot of data scientists' work can be classified as research, where you are given a vague task, you explore the potential solutions, and then you present one that seems to work in POC environment, and the engineers translate into production code. So the man side is different. Data scientists are used to handle a vague problem and make these 2080 decisions to say, I explored the space, I mostly captured the requirements, and I think the solution addressed most of the problems. And when you integrate the solution into production, the same rule apply. Whereas engineering are used to take strict written down requirements from the product manager, and they literally implement it. Everything needs to be correct. They write unit tests. But there are all kinds of limitations when you see it in execution. For example, recently, our engineers write a lot of exception errors. Like if the model call take longer than 20 seconds, they throw error. If like the model response, the conversation length exceeds 5 rounds, they throw error. That is all horrible experience on the front end. But engineers think it's like normal, right? The system isn't supposed to fail. If it fails, it's supposed to throw error. Versus in data science or GenAI, a lot of these are like, it's not that critical if a thing fails. There is a fallback strategy. You need to think flexibly and think from the user experience perspective. Also, the testing is very different. Engineers used to write unit tests that would like run in a mock scenario. You fake the input, you have certain output coming out. But the GenAI solution is all dynamic, right? You have to ping the API. You cannot fix input and output. You are not really checking anything. So you have to ping it in a dynamic way. Sometimes engineers fail to realize this, especially like recently we have the engineers change one line of code that seems to fix a minor bug, and it messes up the major function of the entire system. But their unit tests have no way to capture this, right? You really need to shift your mind. If you're an engineer, you can write the giant solutions, but you need to understand the development of a AI solution, GenAI solution is intrinsically dynamic and shifting. You cannot expect 100% accuracy, and you just have to develop a system to check that.
You have a minute.
1 minute, come on. Okay, we're talking about generative AI. When I started my career, my journey, I had a PhD. I thought I knew everything. But when I started, they said, I remember my chief risk officer said to me, and it goes to what you just said, you need to sit with credit analysts. You need to sit with the back end. I'm like, why? You need to understand the domain expertise. Because the treatment effects that makes it into your data, you're a data scientist. You don't understand the business. You don't understand the underwriting process. You don't understand the treatment effects that happen in collection and recovery. Because when you're building a model, you have a performance window, you have a target. That target is fully loaded with treatment effects. You're underwriting. So data scientists, we all are, but you have to have the domain expertise. And missing the domain expertise, you're building an F-16 and riding it on the highway. You're not using it in the air. And there will be issue, environmental shift, data shift. Those are the treatments. These models are super good in detecting treatment effects. If you don't have that domain expertise, you're building a really crappy model. And then again, my biggest challenge is we're accustomed to model owners that understand SR 11.7, and they've been through the beating since 2008. They know exactly what their expectations are. But today, we have HR using Copilot to come up with a job description. Now, I bet all of you never had in your inventory a job description as a model, correct? Now it's a model. You're using Copilot. So the question is, the training that goes into this, the expectation, you submitting a model to me. I'm not saying the HR job descriptions, it's in scope, but I'm just giving you an example on that. So having that in scope, what is the requirement? You know, it's very easy to go and use Copilot. You said for every 10 developer, there's one validator. Now there's 100 developer and one validator. So the question is, what's the expectations of the model owner, the new model owner, understanding all the stuff that the regular model owner will start to have hiccups at the station, tools are used in production, and they don't know it's a tool or a model. We're still defining what's a model. Can you imagine the headache of the organization going through using Copilot, and model owners have no familiarity of the issues? So that's the big risk. That's what keeps me up at night.